Okay, I think we're ready.
Oops.
Hello, everybody. My name is Phil Bellanti. I'm with the Webex Developer Evangelism team. And today we're going to have a great presentation. It's called Transforming Collaboration, Introducing the Webex Guest-to-Guest Meetings. This one will probably be short and sweet, just the way we like it. We're going to give you a lot of great content that you can start acting upon right away. But before we get actually into the main presentation, I just want to talk a little bit about some developer content updates that we just want to share with you. So everything that I'm going to mention is going to be found on our developer blog page, developer.webex.com/blog. So in the first one, it's a new blog post. It's a contribution from our partner, Boost Space. They have a great integration listed on our Webex App Hub. So what Boost Space is, it's a data synchronization platform, and it allows Webex users to connect to more than 2,000 third-party applications, and you use that to analyze, manage, and automate processes. So in this particular blog, there's CCO Phil Bellanti. He details what the Boost Space for Webex app does, their developer journey on the Webex platform, and their experience with the App Hub approval process. So it's really some good insight there for anybody else who's been thinking about doing that. So it's always great to hear stories from our App Hub developers. That helps inspire others in our community. So you definitely want to check this one out when you can. But in the second item, one of our awesome developer support engineers, Sandip Banerjee, he provides a helpful use guide for using the application transfer portal. So what the application transfer portal is, it's a tool that allows Webex administrators to transfer integrations, bots, service apps, and embedded apps between users within their organization. So this comes in handy when someone who maintains specific apps leaves the company or they assume a new role, and a new user will be taking over that particular app. So in the guide, Sandip walks us through how the transfer portal works, provides answers to some frequently asked questions there. So this will be a really good one to bookmark, to be your guide whenever you need it. And then in the final new blog post, and this one is going to be the latest edition in the A to Z of Webex Contact Center API series. And this is by developer evangelist Joe Zanini. So in this particular one, Joe shows us how to start building custom desktop, how to start building a custom desktop with the agents API and the corresponding webhooks. So he covers different use cases for custom desktops in Webex Contact Center, kind of showing us where the sweet spot is for leveraging the agent APIs. So that's the developer highlights for this month. I'm now going to hand it off to my esteemed colleague, Ralph Schiffert. He's going to present the main webinar content on Webex Guest-to-Guest Meetings. So Ralph, without further ado, please take it.
Thank you, Phil. Yes, so my name is Ralph Schiffert. We are showcasing today another meeting type flavor that we devised. It's called Guest-to-Guest Meetings. And this is showing another showcase for Cisco's innovation in transforming the collaboration based on Webex. And this webinar, to set the stage, will probably take 20 minutes roughly. There will be a few slides, but only to show you the background and put things into perspective. For the majority, I will spend on a live demo. We put together a guest-to-guest app live here and execute it. So meet as guests. And the slides are only backup. And with that, so let me quickly introduce myself in a little bit more detail. So I'm calling myself the custodian for the Webex APIs. So I'm API product manager. And what I mean with that is on developer.webex.com, we have over 1,000 APIs. And if you haven't gone there yet, please do so for all kinds of use cases, telephony, messaging. There's a segment where you have contact center APIs, etc. And many of these APIs, or some of these APIs are I lead several scrums. Some of them I own directly, like the provisioning APIs, people, messaging, etc. Some come over via a contribution model, but they still go through my hands. And what I try to do as a custodian of these APIs, I try to ensure consistency and hopefully that these APIs are intuitive. So I'm 8 years with Cisco. I joined after the Cisco Topo acquisition. I was always Cisco here, and was at Spark in our Webex APIs. I also own the meetings APIs. I have a plenitude of hobbies, notably cycling. I'm in California. I do cycling forever since I was a young boy. But also other more exotic hobbies, like lately I do astrophotography, and there's a little picture of a crescent nebula that I took recently. So here's what we're going to do. And again, remember, I'm a hands-on guy. By the way, you find me always in support spaces, etc. if you need help. I used to start as a developer. These slides only go as background info so you understand what we are doing. We go through the motivation for guest-to-guest meetings, how you order it. Then we do my core that's dear to my heart. We do this live demo. I give you some answers to deployment questions we have gotten and also some ideation for use cases. So let's look into the motivation. So I think clearly if you're here, you may be from a competitor or you may be a strong believer in Webex meetings, but we truly believe that Webex meetings set the industry standard for a meeting experience. And it's both secure, there is no Zoom bombing, it's scalable, but it's also intuitive, right? So especially lately as we grow together, the different suites, the messaging and the meeting and other components, telephony, it all comes together in a really beautiful package. And on top, and this is the experience that is our baseline, right? On top of it, we have introduced lately these whole AI features that people seem to like a lot, actually. There's virtual backgrounds, which I don't rely on today. This is my real background. There's this advanced audio codecs, which I quickly want to highlight because I think they're really impressive. So if you don't know and want to listen to it live, go to the Webex One presentation on YouTube, and they show what these Cisco AI audio codecs can do. And there's samples that play first the original audio, and it's hard to understand. It's really hard. And then they process it via our AI audio codecs, and it makes it really intelligible. And then we have other advanced features on the meeting side, right? And the space side, like summarization. You can step away from the meeting, you come back, and the system catches you up what you missed. Or you can skip a meeting altogether, and instead of listening to the recording forever, you just rely on the summarization feature. So I think clearly we believe that Webex meetings are best in class. However, the problem is it's not always practical for an enterprise to assign a license to a user. And what I mean with that, I go into in a little bit more detail now, and which leads us to guest-to-guest. So we need some flexible licensing for the occasional users. And what this often entails is there are use cases where I do a click to meet. I present a link on a web page, which should bring two people, an agent typically, and a user, some anonymous user, into a meeting where they can inspect a product or get tech support help. We have seen other use cases like a partner insurance and doctor and patient consultations. I go into that later. But the most common use cases, typically in these cases, nobody is licensed for Webex on a permanent basis. And it's not feasible, right, to the person who comes to our website to assign them a Webex license. Doesn't make sense. Our license model doesn't allow assign and reassign. It's actually named user licenses. So you pick a name, a person, you assign a license, and keep that license assigned. It's in our license agreement, okay? So now meet guest-to-guest that copes with that issue of temporary entities that want to meet. So they are not, these guest-to-guest meetings are not licensed based on named users, and they don't rely on pooling, which I just told you is against our license agreement anyway. Some people try to do that, but it's not allowed to pool licenses. Instead, what we are going to do, or what we are doing, is we have a service app. And the service app orchestrates all meetings between unlicensed users. And the service app sets up the meeting, controls the meeting, and has access to the meeting. It's for all practical purposes the meeting host. And the one thing to note, because it's very different from a regular meetings license, the service app gets licensed based on the number of simultaneous meetings. And I mean not the scheduled meetings, but the meetings that are in state started. So if I have 150 doctor-patient consultations going on at the same time, then I need the license needs to have 150 simultaneous licenses. This is how we pool it. And all of these 150 meetings are controlled by the same service app. So it's really easy to program. We see all of that later. Let's quickly look into the ordering. So since this is new and it's a new license, it needs to be ordered via CCW, the e-commerce tool that we have. There's a new PIT. Internally, we call it PIT. Externally, it's usually called a SKU, Webex Guest-to-Guest M. And so a couple of things, the guest-to-guest meetings need to happen on a dedicated site. I explain this later in the demo. These licenses do include full-fledged Webex meetings, right? So if you want, notably for the people who use space meetings previously, which don't work in the suite platform any longer, and that's another reason why we did guest-to-guest. They had no closed caption, they had no recording, etc. What we are doing here is these are full-fledged Webex meetings. So you get closed caption, you get transcription, you get recording, everything. You get not two people. Guest-to-guest is not limited to two people. It's same as for a regular meeting, which is 1,000 attendees for each of these meetings. So keep in mind that these are full-fledged Webex meetings. And then there's a little comment here. Trials are not yet available. We couldn't finish those. The trial function we will implement by March of next year. For now, if you want to get to start developing, you get your hands dirty, sandboxes are the way to go. That brings us to development. And I want to start with some resources. The demo here is just a teaser to get you going. There is the service app guest-to-guest meeting guide that I wrote. It's fairly extensive. It walks you through, you don't need to know anything, no background information. That's just how I do my stuff. I err on the lengthy side, if anything. So it explains service apps in principle, and then it explains how you do guest-to-guest meetings. There are 7 steps in the middle of this guide. If you have background information already, you just follow the 7 lines, which gives you a guest-to-guest meeting. That's on developer.webex.com. I also have a blog written. This is essentially what we're doing today. So it's same. It gives you a lot of background information. It gives you all the steps that we do today in the demo written out. So if you want to go back and do what I do today in this demo, you can go to that blog. It also has the links to all the software that you need to download. Notably, there's a Postman collection with what we are going to use later. And it gives you all the links. So it's very intuitive. I think it's very easy to follow. And quickly a highlight here, we talked I said there are no trials yet, but there are sandboxes. And the one thing that I want to highlight, it says here, request a guest-to-guest sandbox. So for now, we have on our developer.webex.com, we have 2 flavors of sandboxes. One flavor is used for meetings, messaging, regular meetings, messaging. It can also be enabled for contact center if you make a special request. That's one type, and it's labeled as a sandbox. But then we have the guest-to-guest sandbox. You need to use the guest-to-guest sandbox because it's licensed differently for these guest-to-guest meetings. We're going to merge these together in the short term, but for now, these are separate. So, and they're cross-referenced. So when you look into the screenshot here, it says request a guest-to-guest sandbox. And in case you need the other one, it says I need a suite sandbox and brings it to the other sandbox request, and vice versa. So I only wanted to highlight this so you don't go in the wrong sandbox when you want to try guest-to-guest meetings. Okay. And with that, let me do a live demo here. And so we have several personas here, right? So there's a developer that creates the guest-to-guest app, and then there's the admin that approves it, because that's how service apps work in general. And we create everything from scratch here. So I create a new service app with guest-to-guest functionality. And how I went here is in my account, there's my Webex apps, and then create an app and the service app. So that's how I went here. But to save your time, I pre-filled some of the info. So I pre-filled the name. I selected one of the default logos, what it does, and my contact information. Okay, so metadata for the service app. But now, what I did not fill in are the scopes. So if you don't know what scopes are, scope determine what the app can do or how powerful the app is. And scopes will also be approved by the admin during the approval process. And so what we are going to do here is we start first with the most important scope. That is the scope that uniquely identifies a service app that manages guest-to-guest meetings. And that is a guest issuer, this is a guest meeting read-write scope, this one here. And it says here, ability to orchestrate guest-to-guest meetings via service app. So that scope makes this special flavor of a service app. Service app are a concept we use everywhere. They were well loved by the field because they create entities that are not tied to a user. So they're used for long-running processes. And they go through an approval process, which enterprises won't anyway. So the admin approves it. So there are many benefits to service apps in general. But this, to make the guest-to-guest meeting, you give it that scope. And that also triggers some flows in Control Hub later, which we are going to see. And then what I want to also do is I select some of the meetings. So clearly we want to schedule meetings. We want to do recordings. We want to change preferences. Maybe we want to control meeting participants. So I select these usually. And what I want to highlight here is I didn't select the meeting admin scopes, but the regular meeting scopes. And the reason why I highlight this is in the meetings APIs, we have a concept of on behalf. An admin can act on behalf of a user and foster that user. But in the service app guest-to-guest, it's really the service app that is the host. That's why we don't need any of the meeting admin scopes, but we use the regular host scopes. The service app is the host for all these simultaneous meetings. Okay. And then I want to highlight one more scope set. We are not going to use it. It's in the Postman collection, but we are not going to use this in this demo. So there's a guest issuer read and the guest issuer write. So what are these used for? If you recall, or if you have seen that, we are going to deprecate our current guest issuer mechanism. That's a separate uptype. Maybe I go back here and show this to you. There's a guest issuer here. This is going to be, it's already deprecated, it's going to be shut down end of 2025. And instead, what we are going to create guests, you use this guest issuer read-write. Everything else is the same, just that the service app that needs to be approved creates these guests, okay? And so when would you use this mechanism, which we don't do in our demo today? If you want to create some kind of persistence, so let's say you have a doctor-patient consultation and you want to assign an entity to that patient. And so when the patient comes back for a follow-up visit 2 months later, you may want to show them what happened. Maybe there was some chat interaction in the meeting. You would reuse that guest entity, assign it to the same patient again, and then all the history is there. So these are some of the reasons why you would use a guest entity, which is still not licensed, but it's a placeholder. You can refer back to it, you get a history. In my demo today, I don't rely on that because we just create meeting links and we click the link and automatically in the meetings world, when you unauthenticated user, you're automatically treated as a guest. That's why we don't need this in this demo. But in the Postman collection, there are also samples how it can how it create a guest and join the guest to the meeting. For simplicity, I just want to skip this. So I'm creating this service app, the guest-to-guest service app. I copied the secret, we need that later, and I request admin authorization, which makes it visible in Control Hub. So let's go to Control Hub. So I'm the admin now for the org, which wants to host guest-to-guest meetings, right? The developer, often they are in the same org, the development org and the admin org, where the guest-to-guest meeting happen, but not necessarily think about an ISV that resells the stuff, but it's sensitive, so they would set up in the customer org the guest-to-guest side, not on their side. Let me quickly explain here why I highlighted this page. So this is a trial org that I use for my experiments. And you see here we have different meeting sites. Some of them are just regular meeting sites. And then we have this guest-to-guest site, okay? And how does this work? I told you that guest-to-guest meetings can only happen on guest-to-guest sites, right? And how we set this up, when you activate it, we looked into CCW where you place an order. Out of that comes a subscription, comes with an email. When you activate that subscription, there's a wizard that walks you through, and that wizard will ask you, okay, you need to set up a guest-to-guest site. What do you want to name it? And so I filled in this name, and it set up this guest-to-guest site for me. So that's all part of the subscription activation. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. And it becomes important again as we approve this service app that we just created. So this is the one we just created. This is my display name. I played with it. My apologies here. So this is webinar guest-to-guest. Okay, we see this most important guest meeting read-write scope. We are the admin node that approves it. We see some other scopes that we selected. I'm going to authorize it. And what this does is, if you don't know service app, it creates a machine account in the org, and that machine account represents the service app, and all the actions are done on behalf of that machine account. Okay, so we save that, and we go back to the developer. The developer can now refresh the page. And we see here, okay, this org authorized it. I insert the client secret, which I did copy earlier, and I generate the token. And these tokens follow our regular principles. So the access token is valid for 14 days and the refresh token for 90 days. As long as you use the refresh token to create new access tokens, you will never need to touch it anymore. So this token pair should get you going forever and ever and ever for executing API calls. So all what we did so far was just a service app, which we have in existence for 2 years, and to get to the token, and the token represents, among other things, this guest-to-guest meeting. So if you're familiar with development in Webex, so far, nothing was new. And so what I'm going to do next is we do real meetings. So I'm copying the token into my Postman collection. So all these Postman calls get executed with the token we just created. I tend to quickly check the token that it works by retrieving meeting preferences. So since the service app is a host, it clearly has meeting preferences, can set meeting preferences. So that worked well. And so bear with me, we only have 2 steps to do now. One is to set up schedule the meeting, right? It's 1 API call, 2 meetings, and I give it a title, a start time and end time. This is all JavaScript pre-filled for me automatically. And I schedule the meeting now via the service app. And here's our meeting. So it says here, it's the meeting guest-to-guest Lavender. You have all the information. You have a zip dial info, the host key code, etc. It's just a regular, for all practical purposes, it's a regular meeting. It has the same responses that you're used to, only that the service app is a host for it. And now we do one more thing. We use the service app token to call the meetings join. This creates a join link. So we execute this from my previous run. That creates a meeting join link and a start link. And that is the link you could present to a user on a website or send via email or send via SMS. All they need to do is click that link. And what you will see here when I press that button, I route it via some JavaScript and it pops up the Chrome tab for me. So it is like if a user would press the link. I just didn't want to bother copying the link. And what you see me doing here is clearly since these are regular meetings, you can use the Webex native apps that we have, desktop apps, etc. I like to do stuff in the browser because then each participant is in its own tab, which I appreciate. And you see me here, so I'm joining here this meeting, and I'm the patient here, and I'm going on mute so we don't have echo later. It's like in a real world scenario that the doctor comes late, the patient is already waiting. We have found this to be a standard workflow actually, and I do the same for the doctor. Now the doctor comes, wants to see the patient. I do the same thing here. I join the meeting, and I went on mute to avoid echo. So here's the doctor, Dr. Roosevelt Simonis. Here's the patient, Miss Neil Boehm, and these two can interact. And neither of these people is licensed for Webex, right? The license comes from the service app. And as I said earlier, if you have 150 of these ongoing consultations, the single service app, you use one token. It's very easy to program. You use one token for that one service app to control all these meetings. Let me leave here and finish my presentation. So we rolled this out at the end of August 2024. And we have already found a lot of big customers adopted these guest-to-guest meeting mechanisms. It's convenient for them. The license comes really close to pooling, could be very cost effective in some situations. And also, as I said earlier, I implied it anyways, in the Webex Suite meetings platform, space meetings don't work. They are obsolete. There are no space meetings. So there are many reasons why people adopt, our largest partners adopted guest-to-guest meetings very quickly. And with that, a couple of questions that came up and I wanted to get upfront in this webinar, so explain them. Question came up about overage. There is no overage. You need to provision your license when you order it for your peak demand. And these licenses are very cost effective. I believe the list price is $17. I don't get into pricing too much, but they're very cost effective. And think about that, essentially you have a pooling mechanism. So we feel there's no need to give additional overage. Provision it to your max. The one thing that I highlighted, there's a dedicated site where these meetings happen. You cannot put users in that site, right? The site is locked down. Only the service app can instrument meetings in that site. And there's a one-to-one mapping between the guest site and the service app that hosts the meetings on that guest site. So what happens if let's say you're an ISV partner and you want to host, the scenario I gave you earlier, I'm the ISV, but my customer orders the guest-to-guest subscription. Let's think about a scenario where I'm the ISV and I host for different customers on my org, these guest-to-guest meetings. So there may be a scenario where I say, okay, I want customer A on guest site A and customer B on guest site B. For example, if I want to do easy reporting on these different customers and not commingle the data, so that one scenario. So you just order 2 subscription. And with that, you can set up in the same org 2 guest-to-guest sites. But remember, each service app needs to be uniquely assigned to a guest-to-guest site. So you need 2 service apps as well. 2 guest-to-guest sites, 2 service apps. That's how it works. And then one question that came up is, since the service app is the host, it not only sets up the meetings, controls the meetings, so you have things like in-meeting controls, expel, start recording, etc. Also came up, how do you access the recording? Well, the service app is the host. The service app will access the recordings, gets downloads the recordings and transcripts, whatever. It's all done via this service app. And then these AI functions that I mentioned earlier in my intro, they are not included in the base package, just like they are not included in a regular Webex meeting, but they can order this add-on to the guest-to-guest meeting, just like they can be add-on to a Webex meeting. And so I leave you with a couple of ideations. I hinted at that. It's some, and you guys know best. I mean, guys know your business where this stuff fits. This is just where some ideas. What we have seen where seems to be a sweet spot for guest-to-guest meetings. So anytime you have a click to call, right? Based that usually the people that click the button are not licensed for Webex meetings or don't want to log in. Also, we use this guest-to-guest mechanism to be rewriting our own Instant Connect. If you know, that's an app we use it mostly for telehealth. And same thing, we are using guest-to-guest in this app. It's currently being rewritten and being rolled out on top of guest-to-guest. What we have seen apps like apartment showing where the temp, it's usually a temp person that shows the apartment on their mobile phone, right? They walk around and do video. They are not licensed for Webex, and the prospect is not licensed for Webex, so it's a perfect opportunity where these guest-to-guest meetings can be used. Telehealth, I think you saw it from the demo, most telehealth providers, they even sometimes license the doctor, interestingly enough, but the doctor is not willing to log in. So that for all practical purposes, as long as you're not logged in, you're a guest, right? And so you could use the guest-to-guest mechanism, acknowledging that the doctors never log in anyways. You could release the meetings license and use the guest-to-guest mechanism. Release it from the doctor if the doctor is licensed in the first place, and move it over to the guest-to-guest. And then last but not least, a bit more forward-looking, we have this expert on demand product at Cisco, right? So you have one expert on one side, and you have a person wearing a Google Glass or a Vision Pro on the other side, usually for repair, like engine repair or even computer repair, and they don't have the expertise to execute the repair, so they show it to an expert, and these experts rotate, right? They're very specialized. They do only a very little thing. So it doesn't make sense to license them for Webex instead, because it's always a different person usually. So you can use that for these use cases as well. So you could roll out an expert on demand opportunity on top of guest-to-guest. And with that, I think I took a little bit longer on some things, but I'm at the end. Here's my contact info. I told you earlier, I'm super active in all support spaces. The easiest way is actually not this going by email, but it's going via Webex, and you will find me immediately replying because I watch all the public spaces related to developer APIs. And quick, also in channel, if you have some ideas about our developer program, about our APIs, outside of guest-to-guest, I always encourage feedback. You should always feel free to contact me. And with that, I let Phil close it out.
Yeah, thank you, Ralph. That's great. A lot of good content there, and I inside of the chat, and just in case everyone didn't notice, I did put the links to the guest-to-guest meetings guide, and also the blog that you can follow, basically the step-by-step that Ralph put in there. So you can basically do the exact same thing he just did here today. We did have a question come in, Ralph, and it's around like rate limitations. Here the question is, service apps can create 3,000 meetings per day. So the guest-to-guest sites are limited to 3,000 meetings a day, assuming that they're using a single service app for the scheduling. And are there any plans to, release this limit or even raise it?
So that's not quite true. So I might get jumped up. This is not quite true. So the service app can schedule 10,000 meetings. What happens is within a 24-hour period, right? That's what this limit is. Within a 24-hour period, we allow an admin, which the service app is, to schedule not more than 3,000 meetings, right? But you can use over 2 days, you can schedule 6,000 meetings on the same day. So it's about calling the scheduling, not the meeting start. And so sometimes if you have a need, you can come to me. If you think, okay, I need to schedule more than 3,000 meetings in 24 hours, come to me, explain me your use case, and occasionally, and we are open to open this up for scheduling more. So did I explain this well, Phil? So the question was, it sounded like, oh, I can only do 3,000 meetings per day. That's absolutely not correct. The limit is on the scheduling mechanism within 24 hours. So today is Wednesday the 13th. I scheduled 3,000 meetings today for Friday the 15th. and I schedule another 3,000 meetings tomorrow for Friday the 15th. So I have 6,000 meetings on Friday the 15th. That's absolutely possible. We didn't want to overburden the scheduler. That's where this rate limit comes in. But again, if you have a need to increase that, come to me and I will talk to the meetings SRE team, and we may be able to increase it. You need your service app first, right? Because what we're going to do is we only increase it for the particular service app that you created.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks, Ralph, for clarifying that. I think that answers that question. But that's all the questions that came in here today. But if anything else pops up, once you're trying this yourself, again, our developer support team is always there, so you can always ask them. And then also, as Ralph mentioned, if you have a special use case that you kind of want to, have us kind of vet out for you, and potentially just to make sure that you have all the capacity that you need to run and schedule them as many meetings as you'll need, then just reach out to Ralph. And we'll be happy to help out. But with that, I think we're at the end of the webinar. So again, thank you a lot for joining this one. We're going to have another one coming up here soon. So just stay tuned to our webinars page at developer.webex.com/webinars. Just like you found this one, you can register for all our subsequent ones. And with that, that's all for today. Again, thanks for joining, and we'll see you at the next one. All right, take care.